That being said, I'd like to introduce our panelists. We have Rich Discoli, who everybody knows, the CEO from Pacific Southwest Association of Realtors. We have Sarah Trent Miranda, the Director of Education and Product Development with C.A.R. MLS. Many of you know her as well. And we have a non-local expert, Doug Rothhaus. He's the executive at the Omaha Area Board of Realtors. And with that, I'd like to introduce Emily Horn, who most of you know, and she'll be moderating this wonderful panel. So Emily, please take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Peggy. And thanks everyone for being here. Well done, Peggy, getting a little bit variety of perspectives on this elusive hybrid concept. I know that's a word we are hearing again and again. It doesn't seem to be going away. And we're all trying to figure out how to do it well. I think there's a lot of logistical questions and technology, and we're going to get into those nuts and bolts, like Peggy said. So without further ado, I think it might be best to just we'll go one by one, and I'll let each of you panelists start out by just talking about an overview of what you're doing for your hybrids right now, even in terms of the technology. I know Rich got extra prepared and excited about this, and he's going to share I just made that up. You just have it. You have a PowerPoint, and to me, that's being prepared. That's being a good AD. And I wanted to ask Rich if he would kick it off by telling us about what he's doing.
Sure. Yeah. Excited is a stretch, but it was a struggle to kind of get to where we are now, and we learned a lot of things. So I figured, why have everyone waste time if anyone else is going through the same thing? I started out by doing a lot of research, and I found a ton of information from Rotary. A bunch of the churches had a lot of information, and Toastmasters. So if you Google those three organizations had a lot of information about what to do. So I'm going to just real quickly go over 3 different setups we have. This is a setup we used pre-COVID. So we would have this, and we have a boardroom that seats about 15 as well. This is just a small conference room, but in our boardroom, the same setup works. And we have like a TV that's on a cart that we can wheel. This is in my office, but we can wheel that cart into our boardroom, and we have 3 offices. So we have 2 facilities with boardrooms. So we kind of would wheel this around, and it's a 55-inch TV, and we have a little kind of monitor, a computer actually strapped on the TV. So it's all self-contained, and it's basically just like a computer on wheels, and you can see the camera is on top. So it works really well just for small rooms. And then this Think Center, they make these, you can get them from, I think the NAR discount's really good. You can buy these little computers for like between $300 and $600, depending on which one you get. This is like a 5-year-old computer, and it seems to work pretty well. For a medium-sized conference room, this is one of our medium-sized conference room. We have like a 72-inch TV and a very similar setup, with a podium up front. But what we did for this one, this was pre-COVID. This is post-COVID. We set up these what are they called? They're called Samsung Galaxy Tab A7. So they have 1080p cameras, which are pretty decent. I'm sorry, 8 megapixel cameras and 5 megapixels on the front. But for $169, they're like a self-contained video. So we set them up, and a speaker can be here. You can see we did for this meeting, we did actually a 3-way hybrid. So we had our 3 service centers were set up on a Zoom call, and we piped in, that's Otto Katrina, we piped him in remotely into the 3 different meeting halls. And then we had 3 of our board members, our executive committee in each location, and each one spoke to all of our members for our annual meeting. And for the larger size conference rooms, we use an overhead projector. And I think Doug will probably get into the mixing boards and things like that. But we do have like the key for the sound and everything is to have a mixing board, so you can actually use a microphone and overhead speakers and have everything work together. What we do for ours is we have a main laptop that's staffed by either a staff person. In our pitch sessions, our weekly pitch sessions, we use a lead volunteer who can staff that. And that's the host machine. That one handles the sound, managing the meeting, and it does not handle the video. The video is handled by, and it also streams to Facebook. So we stream most of our meetings to Facebook, and we have a private Facebook group that only our members can be part of. So it's not like if you make a faux pas or you're doing a listing and you don't want, information about confidential remarks, leaked out to the public. It's protected inside a private Facebook group. We use, in our last meeting, I regret, I told everyone the wrong microphone, and I have the right one here, and I'll share this with everyone, but it was a Soundtech CM1000 USB, and instead of having a mic that you have to have your face right in, it does a really good job of picking up sound for about 10 to 15, maybe even 20 feet. So in a conference room, if people are in the back of the room, you still have to repeat what they say to the people in the audience. But we can also hand around a mic, but we haven't been doing that. This seems to work good enough for the meetings we have right now. The other thing that's kind of cool is the mic stand. You can see up here, this is one of our recent hybrid meetings. The mic stand, we mount that Samsung on it, and we had existing mic stands, so we use this here. It's basically and you can see these were 3 for $40 on Amazon, but there are a lot of similar type tools, and you mount that on top of the mic stand. It makes it really easy to use. So for our first live multicast, we did 3 live locations, and then we had, I mentioned the dignitary speaking from afar, and we were able to get audience engagement from all 3. So it was really good. It worked great. The people who were in attendance were just they were just really happy. I think one thing that's key in this, a thing we learned, is you really need to use the spotlight. The spotlight helps. And webinar format works the best in a multicast situation like that, because we had one board member who in the beginning, before we started realizing what was going on, he caught in picking his nose on the meeting on the big screen. It was like, oh my gosh. So webinar only, that was a takeaway from that. And here's kind of how the screen looked in the multicast. Once we started spotlighting everyone, we had the camera and then a speaker like this in each room, so you can see each person. When the dignitary got on, it was kind of cool because you can take that Samsung tablet, and it's just like your phone. It's got a reverse, so you could reverse it. And when the person who's not in a room is speaking, it was kind of nice because he could see the audiences in all the room and kind of get a reaction from them as he was speaking. Zoom, one thing that really impressed us too with the sound is Zoom does a really good job about when you use a mixer, about filtering out the sound. So that's something built into the Zoom software. So if you're only using one mic with one speaker system through one computer and you're going through a mixer, Zoom cuts out the feedback from the mic. So we were surprised that we could do a pass around mic along with the mic as long as it was going through the same mixer. I think I hit on these other points here. Yeah, I did. I'll send this out, but that's the mic we use that works really well. There's another picture. The mic we kind of put out in front of the room, and it picks up the speaker over here, which is good. These are kind of like jacks. We can use our computer, our HDMI to our overhead projector, and we use RCA jacks to our mixer, and that plugs into the computer. There's a close-up kind of what the camera looks like. And I just wanted to touch on the third one, the OWL. We had bought this for our board meetings early on, and I was really excited about it. Phil uses up a PWR. He's really happy with it. I was a little disappointed. I think it works ideal for a meeting of like 8, but when we use it with a boardroom of 15, it's really slow on tracking. So the way the software works is the mic works great, but as you speak, it does voice recognition and it picks up the speaker. And then as a second board member starts speaking, it splits the screen in half, and then kind of has both people speaking at the same time, and then we'll drop the other one and kind of go to the new speaker. But there's about, I'd say like a 4 to 5, 6 second delay. So if your board isn't really chairing the meeting and going slowly speaker to speaker, I thought it was a little distracting, and I liked our pre-COVID system a little better. We have not tried using it with a two camera system, which maybe Sarah will talk about, but this may work well with a two camera system. That's what I got. Thank you.
Wow, that was impressive. I especially love and appreciate how much detail you showed us with the photos. I think photos speak 1,000 words, especially when we're talking about technology. Rich, a couple questions for you. I know that there was a ton of information in there, And as Peggy just said, you'll get a copy of his PowerPoint so you can really dig into that, and where especially Rich was talking about the different size conference rooms. Robin asked a good question. How do you qualify a medium versus a large conference room? Is it by capacity, square footage? What do you use?
You know, our two large conference rooms can seat 150 each. And then our medium conference room can seat about 45. And then our boardroom can seat about 15 to 20 around the table. So that's kind of how we qualify them. And I did add links to the PowerPoint, to the actual Amazon links of where we bought a lot of that stuff.
That is such helpful information. That covered so much. So can you just summarize really quick? So your small meeting room, what your setup is? Can you just identify each meeting room setup?
So the boardroom, we have a 55-inch TV. And what's nice about the TV is the speaker is built into the TV. So, you know, the sound, I think I'm looking forward to hearing from Doug, because I think the sound is really the key. And with the TV in the small one, and then in the medium one, we have a 72-inch TV. Now, probably even get a 100-inch TV pretty inexpensively. But the nice thing about that is it's one HDMI from your computer into the TV, and the sound and everything travels through that. Once you get into the bigger conference room, which we consider to be the 150-person one, then we have a sound system. And that's where you need a mixer, and you need a separate sound coming out of your computer. The HDMI doesn't talk to both your mixer and your overhead projector at the same time. And that's where it gets a little more complicated.
So if someone's just starting out and they've never done a hybrid meeting, would your suggestion be to start with a small room, like what you just described as a boardroom, and try to perfect that and invest a smaller amount of money into that first, and then kind of work your way up, since a mixer and a lot of the other equipment can get a little more costly?
I don't know. We're really happy. I mean, so the small room, what's nice about our small one, we put it on a cart so we can move it from boardroom to boardroom. I can hold a little meeting in my office. Like, that's nice. I would start, I think the medium one's okay. If you mount a TV, if you have a 45-person room, which a lot of smaller associations have a room that size, you can mount a pretty decent TV overhead. Now, if you already have a overhead projector and you already have a sound system, then you got to figure that out. I think a lot of it depends on what you already have, so you don't have to buy those things again.
Right. Okay, a lot to think about. Okay, that's a great open. I'm going to move on to Sarah. Sarah, C.A.R. MLS is not necessarily new to this hybrid deal, and I think you guys had a real maybe head start and benefit coming into the pandemic, unbeknownst to you guys. Tell us a little bit about when you started doing hybrids and where you're at now.
Well, thank you, and thanks for having me. It's great to see a lot of familiar faces and some new faces. Yeah, we kind of got lucky. We moved into a new location in August 2018. And so that provided an opportunity for us to be a little more innovative and forward thinking. Our board, we have members who are in other parts of the state who wouldn't be able to commute to a board meeting. So that was kind of, I think, the foundation that we built off of. And then as we've grown and been able to service associations throughout the state and also accommodate employees who are out of the state or in other parts of the state. So we really needed to start thinking about that on a bigger scale. So we worked with a company that actually provided a design assistance, and then actually came in, looked at how it needed to be installed, what equipment would be necessary, and really kind of helped us make a lot of those decisions, because it, like you said, it is very costly when you're trying to do something on a larger scale. So I won't repeat a lot of what Rich said, but there are some pretty important elements. Obviously, the conference system, having some sort of a control panel. We put in cameras. We have 2 cameras. It's called an eagle eye detector. So you have one camera that actually gets the wide angle of the group of the room, and then a second that actually has voice detection. So it'll zoom in on whoever is speaking in the room. So it kind of makes attendees feel as though they're there, and kind of it makes it feel a little more real, I think, for anyone who's attending. And then the other thing, as far as sound, I think that was one of the biggest things that we learned from our previous location and making this move. And someone once said it was clunky, and we've improved on that, which is good. So, and it's true, you know, and you don't want it to be clunky. You don't want the audio to go in and out. You want people to actually be able to hear what everyone's saying. If they speak quiet, they're a quiet speaker. If they have a loud voice, you know, you want it to be able to kind of accommodate all different voices. So we had microphones, a mic system installed. So we have hanging mics throughout our entire this particular conference room. So I haven't heard of any recent issues. The audio seems to be pretty good, but there's always those curveballs when someone opens a bag of chips or a cough or a sneeze or something like that. So, so those things you can't prevent from happening, but you can definitely, I think, invest in a good enough quality of equipment to be able to, you know, filter out some of those sounds. So that's what we're doing in our large conference room, and that seats about 35 to 40 people. But then we also have 2 monitors. So we have a pretty decent amount of people who will attend virtually. So I'd say probably even 50-50 these days.
Wow. And Rich had a question actually for you about the eagle eye. Does it pan around the room or simply zoom in from where it is?
No, it actually moves, and will move and zoom in on whoever is speaking at the time.
Is that just ever a distraction? Just get used to it.
I think it creeps people out a little bit the first time that they come and sit in the conference room, because they're sitting there and all of a sudden you see these cameras moving around. But on the other side, when you're attending the meeting virtually, it's definitely cool because it'll zoom in and then it'll pan out and you can kind of see the whole room interacting. So you get used to it.
And how do you see engagement on both sides, those from in person versus virtual? Do you see them equally engaging for the most part, or are those in the virtual setting a little less likely or a little more hesitant?
I think there's definitely some preparation. I think if you properly, welcome your guests, whether it's a meeting, it's an official board meeting, or if it's someone who's attending a session, a general session, there's a lot of setup that goes involved with each meeting and making sure settings are properly set. And like Rich said, making sure you don't see someone doing something on an 85-inch screen that they shouldn't be doing, things like that, where I think it just requires some prep work. And then also whoever's facilitating the meeting to make sure you kind of mention some housekeeping items, encouraging people to put on their video. I think that always, gets people to engage more when they know that they're actually on screen. And, just being able to properly set the tone. And I think if you do that, it encourages people to be a little bit more active. And again, I think if you're utilizing chat, like here, being able to run the meeting in the way that you feel is best based on the amount of attendees, encouraging people to use the chat versus just unmuting and speaking out. I think we've all learned some Zoom or hybrid etiquette over this last year. So I don't see as many flubs as I used to.
Yeah, I bet you could do a reel on the flubs.
A lot.
Probably have them in your mind.
My favorite one is "you're muted." We get that one a lot, right?
Dina tells me that once a week. And
yeah, can't get through a meeting without saying that at least once. But yeah. What versus the alternative? I guess it's okay.
So one thing I'm really curious about, since you have so much experience with these hybrids, is the communication, specifically how the chat versus the verbal engagement works at the meeting. So obviously, are those in? So I think the chat has really been an interesting element to meetings, because it's almost like you're getting people's thoughts as they're experiencing the meeting, where they would usually be sitting in a meeting, you're thinking about that speaker. Instead, you're going, "This is awesome," or "This is dry," or whatever it is, but you're actually getting like this engagement that you would never otherwise, or we never used to get through the chat. How does that piece incorporate, or does it? And then like just the communication in general, how do you manage that?
We learned really quick through doing just meetings, but also trainings. We've had to shift doing all of our education sessions to virtual. And so depending on the amount of people who are attending, having more than one person manage the meeting, having a moderator, having someone manage the chat, just like how you guys are kind of tag teaming it today, I think is critical. It's rare these days that we'll do a meeting or a webinar without having at least 2 people, someone who's able to manage the meeting, but also someone who's able to manage the chat and point out those types of comments. Because if you have a lot of people attending, sometimes I think things can get lost in the chat. So you want to make sure you have someone who is, jumping in, able to respond and not let something get missed or an important question. And I think that also makes them feel involved when you will, acknowledge a comment that's left in the chat. And I just saw the chat pop up right now about not having more than 2 staff. And so I think that that's where you just have to be really, really keen on how you set your meetings up and making sure that you establish the format of the meeting. And so you can have people either only enter questions through the chat and then go back to them when you can, or, encouraging them to raise their hand and unmute themselves. But it's all in how you manage the meeting. The technology is great, but I think that's a huge element.
So prepare and set the expectations. That's a big one. I think that's a really good point. Do you happen to have a script? And this is the last question I'll ask, and then I'll move on to Doug. Do you have a script that you use for all your meetings? That's kind of that housekeeping. And would you be able to share a template?
Sure. Yeah, we for our education, especially when we do general sessions for larger groups, we will open up with like a PowerPoint that just has some of the housekeeping items and almost have an intro. And that way it kind of sets the stage, and no one has any questions on how it's going to flow. And then my training team, they actually have a script that they're now trying to follow and just create consistency. So I think that's been the biggest thing for us, is just making sure we're all on the same page. We're all following the same suit. And so yeah, absolutely. But I think that absolutely helps, having some sort of script to follow. This is what to expect. We'll take questions at certain times, or however you want to structure it, but definitely important.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm going to move on. Moving on. Oh, I'm sorry.
Before you move on, Bob Hart had a really good question in the chat, and he just wanted to know for any of the speakers if they have a second smaller monitor for the speakers at the podium so that they can view the virtual attendees.
Anyone want to grab that one?
Yeah, we have that small tablet there, and it can pick up a few of the attendees. But one of the things we actually have been thinking about is who's the primary audience. If you want the primary audience to be the people on Zoom, then you could do that. But then if you think about it, you have a big screen between your speaker and your audience in the live room. So even when I go and I speak on these hybrid meetings, I have to decide, am I going to speak to the room that's live, or am I going to speak to the to the screen where I see the people? And that's a decision you have to make about who's more important. We're trying to drive people to the live meeting, so we speak to the live meeting and not to the remote audience. But that's something you have to decide. That's a business decision.
That's a really, really good question, Bob. Thank you. We have some more questions coming in, and I'll make sure we get to them. So just hang tight. I want to make sure Doug tells us about his overview, because it gives that third perspective. And Doug, you're coming all the way to us from Omaha, a perfect example why virtual is kind of king and needs to be incorporated into our world. We wouldn't be able to be here without that. Please tell us a little bit about how you're set up.
Yeah, thank you, Emily. Yes, all the way from Omaha. We're wrapping up the College World Series here in town, so everybody's out late and having fun with that, and then making it to work in the morning. And I've gotten a lot of sun this week, but I am in I'll call it kind of a warm camera spot. I wanted to, well, first of all, I think Richard made some good comments about the different room sizes. And I think that was one of the first things we looked at. We were going to implement it in this room, and I am sitting in our education room right now. I thought I'd take the call in here. We also have a boardroom next door. The boardroom seats 20 around a long table. This room seats 63 at the tables. If you do it classroom style, we have it set up right now for 42, and I'll show you that here in a second. But the boardroom isn't too much different than what I've heard described here. We have an 80-inch or 81-inch TV at one end. it's very high resolution. It has a computer behind it that operates, so we can actually have people, they would actually email their presentation so they don't have to bring it along, or we have it in advance so we can set it up, or we're also able to do the Zoom invites, that way, and just participate as a room into an existing meeting, kind of like I'm doing now. But I think what we did do in that, and somebody else mentioned it too, that the sound is awfully important. And that was one of the first kind of revelations for me. I was all interested in the video and how we were going to do it. First of all, and let me back up just a little bit. We had our board sit down and, or not our board, but our executive team sat down, and we kind of made a list of things. Actually, we were on a Zoom meeting now that I think about it, but we made a list, kind of wish list type thing, and what we wanted and what we didn't want. And we had a really good, what I would call bad or mediocre example. And the board was convinced that any investment that came out like that wasn't worth it, to make sure that, and that was primarily for just kind of a bad camera angle, kind of dim room, but also poor sounding like you're in a coffee can, or got your head in the corner of a vacant house or something. But anyway, so we kind of made that list, and then I did consult with some engineers, and we ended up, I interviewed 3 different engineering firms, but AVI is the name of a company we ended up selecting. They do have offices across the country. So, maybe some of you have heard of them. I don't know what their status is in California, but anyway, they were the one that really enlightened me to the sound. And he had some examples that he brought. And first of all, during the pandemic, we had trouble getting the engineers because they were all busy doing churches and other social organizations that needed, this equipment set up. So, but anyway, so our boardroom is somewhat similar to what you've heard here. I think our Ed Center is a little bit different. And I'm sitting in front of a small control panel that's kind of like an iPad. And in our Ed Center, we have, there's 2 ceiling mounted cameras, and they do not follow you automatically. However, our control panel has 4 preset settings for each of those cameras. So there's 8 camera angles, if you will, to handle the room. We also had some other things on the wish list. Our State Real Estate Commission requires that CE have the attendees have them visually present on the camera, and so we had to make that possible as well. But anyway, if I could just take a minute to demonstrate the video, I guess. I am sitting, and it's kind of why the light isn't real good back here, but I'm in the corner of a room using a speaker's microphone. We have 2 lavalier mics and 1 handheld mic that we can use in the system. But I'll select a different camera, and here you can see, the different angle, and it's a preset. I just switched from one camera to another. And then for like a CE class or something, we would put the class on a view that looks more like this. And so you can see the whole room and how everybody is on the screen. And then before a meeting, and somebody said, I think said about preparing for the meeting and how it somewhat creates a new list of chores. One of the things that we do is kind of think about the meeting and what kind of presets we might have. At the end of the pandemic, we were still distancing. We were still wearing masks if we were in close proximity to each other. So this room was arranged actually as a boardroom. And we never had more than 6 or 8 people come in. We have a 14-person board. Usual attendance at it is about 20 people, and normally it's in the boardroom. In fact, we had one this morning, and that was in the boardroom over here. We're 2 hours ahead of you, so we started a little earlier here. But anyway, our boardroom serves that purpose well. And I think we had 23 people in the meeting. We had 10 in the room and 13 at home or at their desk at work or whatever. But, and that's kind of typical. I found that we had a lot of people saying, we have to get back in the office. When are you going to let us back in the office? We need face-to-face meetings. I don't know if any of you have heard that, or you have some of your leadership that feels they have to have, you know, that personal contact and be in touch with everybody. Anyway, so it was kind of funny to us that when we did create the technology to do the hybrid meetings, the at-home option is still pretty popular. And I think one of the reasons it is, and one of the challenges that everybody has, is you want your technology to make the people at home as effective as the people in the room. And I think that's kind of a challenge for everybody. I think it was for us as well. I don't have to stay in this view. I could look at you a little closer. But anyway, we felt like the participant at home needed to be interactive. They needed to feel as involved as those that were physically present. And so, you know, we kind of focused on that. And I think that's where the audio comes in a great deal. We have, just so I can kind of finish a tour here, we have, I don't know if you can't quite see it in this shot, but if I pan over to the side a little bit, we still have it set up from an earlier presentation. I can't quite get there from here. Well, maybe I can. Okay, there you see a podium with a backdrop behind it. Oh, you don't.
Still
I'm sorry.
see you. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
now
there
you
we
do.
go.
Okay, so there I am in the corner, and there's our podium up at the front. So that might be where a speaker would be during that. Our system does allow you to focus on that speaker, and let me see if I can get a good shot of that. So this is the other camera view.
Oh.
So the speaker can stand there and speak. And so we also are able to do some broadcast education and do some interactive training, which we found real good. In this room the other day, I had 5 staff people in here. I had 2 more staff people at home. And the staff, we were doing some cross training on key boxes. And the staff person in the room was able to share her handheld mobile phone and show the application on the screen at the same time. So we had people here, people at home, and a shared screen at the same time. And we were really happy with the way that has worked out. So
Doug,
anyway,
can I ask you a question about that? So if
Oh,
you were
please.
if you were having a hybrid meeting right now and there were people in those seats and there were us here, would you be you have to have someone manually manipulating that camera just like you just showed us? Or is there a voice detection option?
You know, it depends a little bit. Like if we don't really use this room for a board meeting or for a governance. This wouldn't probably be our setup. We would probably do more like a simulated board table, you know, that looked at the screen. But then it's a very simple process to move the camera to where you like it and then just preset it. It's kind of like resetting, I'm going to date myself, but the buttons on your radio in the car, you know, where you can preset the channels. It's a little bit like that. It's fairly easy to do. And anyway, it's the panel is all programmed for us. I mean, I spent a lot of time on the video earlier before everybody got on the call. I did demonstrate some ceiling microphones that we have. So if I turn off the handheld, and now I've turned on a ceiling microphone. And so this is the sound that we get from an attendee at the meeting. And I guess what we've liked about it is that everybody can speak in a normal tone of voice and be heard. We have in this room, and I'll go back to this because I know you can hear better on the microphone, but in this room, we have 2 ceiling panels, and this is just a suspended ceiling. There are 2x2 foot panels, and we have 2 panels that fit in there that are they're digital trying to think of the name here. I think I got a note here, but anyway, they are a very high cost solution, but they're very effective. And fortunately, I'm from an association that's been saving money for 130 years, and they were able to, to go that extra bit for the room. But
The
they're
rainy
very
day.
effective. And
They
there's
saved
one of
for a
them in
rainy
our
day and it rained.
there's one of them in our boardroom as well. And I'll tell you a funny story. And Richard talked about catching the guy on camera picking his nose. It wasn't quite that bad, but what we do find out is that, any boardroom I've been in, or any education room, there's always a little conversation going on the side. At some point in the meeting, two people start talking to each other. Well, the ceiling microphones are really good. And for the people at home, they get to listen to that conversation as well. I mean, it's sometimes the
Wow.
person speaking over, is louder than they are. But anyway,
Like
it
a
is embarrassing.
big brother situation there.
Right. So they were talking at the end of the table. The people in the room couldn't necessarily hear them, but then somebody at home made a comment following up on what they had said.
Awesome.
And so anyway,
Thank you.
the sound was our big aha, I guess, that that's, that is really an important part of it all. And
Those are some high quality mics.
Yes.
yeah. And
Yes.
I don't think I'm as technically advanced as Richard, because if somebody said put it in my mixer, yeah, I'd have to go get somebody down the hall. But
I don't
the
know,
one thing
Doug.
we had too
You're
is,
impressing us here, Doug. I think you're not giving yourself enough credit. You got a bag of tricks, and we didn't even expect.
It helps when you hire an engineer and they know what they're doing, and they custom program this little panel for you that really makes it easy. And that was one of our things. We don't use a single remote control for anything, except that with one exception. I'm sitting here looking at the screen, and I think somewhere I don't know, I've probably got a preset to that, but let me see if that's a banner in our room. That's kind of our on hold screen. But here's a shot of our stage, and you can see.
Oh wow, I'm really.
You can see Emily in the corner of the screen, but in that left box are actually the bottom of two chairs, if you will, and the screen is hanging in front of them. But if we zoom back, you can see there's a little stage at this end of the room. Okay. And so we could put a panel up there. And if we raise the screen, that takes away our monitor for the in-room computer. But we do have the ability, we've got some smaller TVs that we plug into the HDMI port in the wall. It's also made for a speaker to come in with their own laptop. And if they plug into the HDMI up by the podium, it will actually overwrite the system that we have in the room, and it will become the live computer, and we can actually toggle between the two with the control panel. So I didn't think of everything, and my hat's off to Richard. I was pretty impressed when he's going through the different setups and all the elements of it. I can't tell you. I know that we have an audio video network box that's in the closet over here, and it is a what do I say? It's got a lot of different parts in it. I can't even find myself. If you push the wrong presets, you don't get them. But anyway, the audio visual box is the brains of it, and they've made it so we don't have to think. I literally go to the control panel and hit start, and the projector comes on, and everything gets activated. The other room, I don't know, you have to push a couple buttons, but there is a keyboard, and a mouse that go along with the computer that operates this. So it's really just a keyboard and a mouse and the little control panel for this room. And I'm glad to say we haven't really had to have an operator, but during the pandemic, we had our installation in this room, and everybody's sitting, far apart with masks on, and one at a time, people went up to the stage, and we actually put two podiums on the stage and rotated back and forth, but turned out to be a pretty good show. It worked well, but anyway, I've got a good board to work with, and they were very much in the belief that hybrid meetings are here to stay.
Well, it
And
sounds like you've created some real solutions that can be very versatile. I like how you have different setups. You could almost have different types of meetings in one room. You showed me like that White House press secretary look, that you could have one type of meeting there. You could have like your president giving a live stream from there. You could do there. What you showed us was so fascinating, because I feel like you gave everyone else the idea. You don't have to have different rooms. You could actually just create one room with different setups and maybe invest in just that room, which is awesome. Doug, a question for you. Looking total at all of what you just showed us for the AV, how much money would you say round about have you invested in that?
I would say that with computers and everything, because just to backtrack, I mean, we had 10-year-old projectors that were dim. What we've installed now is very high resolution. It's as high resolution as your monitor is. And so it matches that. But we probably made about, well, I know exactly, but we spent about $55,000 between the two rooms. And that was literally gutting everything we had. So you're talking about the speakers, the microphones, the big screen monitors, the high resolution, and then all the switching network and the programming for the keypad and everything like that.
And that was
So
2 rooms, you said, right?
that's for both rooms, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. And what do you think that, like, would there be something you'd say you could do for less? Is there like another level that you feel like could be workable maybe for an association with a smaller budget?
Well, I feel like the luxury was probably the boardroom. I don't think that it's so over our head that I think Richard had a lot of good solutions. I think, well, in fact, I think you both talked about good solutions for boardrooms. I think we probably, we could have maybe done a little better on that, price wise and so forth. It's still very much automatic and is easy to operate. So we appreciate that. But I feel like we tried to make systems where you didn't have to run down the hall to get somebody to set up the meeting or to fix the meeting,
Yeah.
if it got sidetracked. But we're having most all our committee meetings. We never did really get locked down. I mean, maybe in Nebraska, it's a little easier to distance yourself, than it is some places. But
that's a good segue into my next question, because I think it's important that the technology doesn't define your meeting goals, but you define your meeting goals and then find the technology that works for those meetings, right? So I would love to hear from Sarah, Rich, how you determine what went into your thought process in determining which meetings that you think are more advantageous to offer hybrid and which to do just in person or just virtually. Anyone, feel free to jump in.
We started our hybrid marketing. So a lot of us do marketing sessions, pitch sessions. So we started our hybrid, and for us, we kind of feel like our pitch sessions are our church. Like that's where people come and that's where we recruit. That's where we get our new committee members. That's where we get to tell them about what we're doing. They're really like our followers. So we want them to come in, but we're having a hard time. I know someone mentioned in chat, we're having a hard time getting people to actually show up live. So we've had a lot of our affiliate members show up live. And we've had some realtors, now that the market's slowing down a little bit, pitching. But for us, it remains to be seen about how many people actually engage in a hybrid meeting. Our annual meeting went really well. We had like 100 in one room, 30 in another, and like 15 in the other. But I don't know, like if you bring in a big outside speaker, maybe, but it remains to be seen for me. I don't know how this is going to play out.
Yeah, we've recently surveyed all of our associations and boards just to kind of get a pulse on where everybody's at. Are they going to do any live sessions Q3, Q4, the rest of this year? What about starting in January? And honestly, it was all over the board. I mean, I still think that we're still coming out of this, and what this is really going to look like moving forward. I don't think that hybrid is going to go away. And for us, there are certain meetings that will always be a mix. So for folks who are not able to commute to where our location is, they're always going to have to, Rich, for example, down, for him coming up to Chino Hills, even though it doesn't seem like that far, you throw in any kind of rush hour or anything, it's a full day. for him to come up and be with us. We'd love to have him there, but we know it's not, it's just not realistic. So for him to pop on for an hour virtually and get on with his day, it makes sense. So I think that format is here to stay. For education, kind of switching my hat, it's a mix, and the associations, I think, are even still not quite sure. And I've seen a couple little questions about, well, what if you have virtual and in person, and how do you handle the registration, and how do you manage that? So I think that's for us, as far as an area to improve and kind of be forward thinking, and being able to equip not only our location in Chino Hills, but also my training team who will go back out in the field, because I think there is an in-person element that you cannot get rid of, and I think certain people like to be in person, and they want to attend, an education event or an event in person, and, network and get all the benefits of having an in-person event. But then I think you're still going to have folks that, we're still coming out of this. And so for a certain amount of time, they don't want to go in person. So how do we accommodate them as well? And for me to be able to have a trainer go out to a location and teach and share their screen and have people online and also have people in the room. And I think understanding those dynamics, being able to properly equip them, and I saw the practice. I think that'll be a huge part of it. So I think we're still figuring that out, to be totally honest, and exactly what that's going to look like. We're doing it to a certain degree, but I think that we're going to have to perfect that and fine tune it moving forward, because the hybrid format, I think, is almost becoming like it's expected. People are like, oh, well, I can't be there in person, I'm just going to join virtually.
Yes, I agree with you. I think that it's like we have to be everything to everyone, and that's what the biggest challenge right now, among other things. So for social events, I find that we just did an AE survey, an AE and association staff survey, and thank you to all of you who actually participated in that. We got a great response. And we did ask a lot of questions about what the anticipation was in terms of returning to the different meeting structures for a board meeting, for a committee meeting, for an installation event. And without question, the social events, the fundraisers, the installation events, people said it was overwhelmingly responded to in person. And then for education was overwhelmingly hybrid, and actually mostly everything else was very heavy on the hybrid. So I know that everyone's really, grappling with this. We talked about a lot. I think the advantages we talked about a lot, just a lot of things you just said, Sarah, but what are some disadvantages to having a hybrid meeting other than the technology logistical things? What are some other disadvantages? Doug, do you have any thoughts on that? You've been doing this for a bit.
I don't know, it's been pretty positive for us, I guess. And I feel like we started doing hybrid meetings maybe a little earlier than the rest of the world. I mean, we were doing virtual meetings like everybody else, and slowly people wanted to trickle in. And then when the CDC changed their mask recommendation, that was kind of it. We allowed people in. We still provide masks and encourage people to wear them if they like, but it seems that the downside is probably that there are some members who, and I think it's a different personality type, but it's probably the extroverted ones, as opposed to the introverted ones. Not that there's a definite line, but it seems those that are more outgoing were more in favor of having in-person meetings, and are disappointed that everybody's not showing up.
Yeah.
So I see a little bit of that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. Realtors by nature, I find to be extremely social beings. We could see at the C.A.R. business meetings, there's a lot of hugging. I don't know how many professions hug as much as realtors do. And I think it just is a testament to the fact that they do love that energy of being in person. And we're hearing that a lot. Rich, Sarah, what disadvantages other than the technology, maybe trials and tribulations?
One disadvantage I really don't like about the hybrid or the Zoom is being able to have that confidential or semi-confidential, quote, in the know type conversation with we'd have our pitch sessions, and you can give some people insight into some backroom politics, maybe like things that are going on in the city that maybe you don't want broadcasted out anywhere, but you want your members to know. Can't really do that, you know, with the risk of that being recorded and being, you know, put on social media, you know, and that type of thing. It's just, that's a negative to me.
Yeah, great point. Sarah, anything else coming up for you?
That's a good point. Yeah, you never know. Well, and I think that's where I was going is you kind of never know. I mean, you have people attending, but they could be doing other things while they're attending. And especially if it's an education session or something where, you know, you're trying to keep people engaged and keep their attention, you know, they're texting or they're taking a call or they're getting up and getting a snack or, you know, turning their camera off and doing whatever. And I mean, we've all done it. But I think that if you're able to do that, you know, you're just not as engaged, you're not as focused. And so that is one thing about in person that I know my team really misses, is being able to be with people, having that conversation, you know, asking questions, being able to feel the room. You know, that's can't feel the Zoom room. Like it just it's really difficult. If you've mastered that, please let me know how, because I'd like to
and you're like
take
a,
that.
I don't know, like behavioral expert or something.
Yeah, you know, I will say I've panned through the pictures with this group and everyone who's sharing their video looks like they're totally like engaged. And so this is a good group. You guys are an exception to the rules. So
this panel is a really good group, and that's probably a big part of why they're paying attention. We do have a few questions I want to go to, and just to piggyback on that same comment, I do agree with you that those what I miss a lot is those side conversations. If Sarah and I were in a meeting together, hey Sarah, how are you? How's your daughter? You know, you connect in a way that you just lose that, I think, virtually. There's so many benefits, but I do miss just the partnerships that we've built by being, when we are in person at those C.A.R business meetings or in person with our members. They take more intentional effort to say, hey Sarah, can you get on a Zoom? Let's catch up, or whatever it is. Okay, so we have Peggy, I will let you direct the questions since they're coming in a little faster than I can read, and I want to make sure in these few minutes we get some important ones answered.
Okay, let's start with Elaine's, because that was the first one that hasn't been asked yet. I'm wondering if any of the panelists have done a hybrid meeting off-site where like say the Elks Lodge or a veterans building or something like that, where they didn't have good equipment. Then how do you manage those?
Your mobile briefcase, your mobile hybrid briefcase. I don't know.
I will say one thing, because my training team would go out in the field a lot. So even though we weren't like broadcasting a presentation, good Wi-Fi is like key. And so everyone, I mean, I think these are kind of becoming a thing of the past, but an external jetpack, you know, where you can have like an alternative Wi-Fi source has been saved us in many situations. So, I mean, that's one piece of the puzzle as far as equipment that you need to successfully, you know, host or train. But that would be one takeaway for me, just making sure you have good Wi-Fi.
You know, Emily, one thing kind of in addition to that, when we were holding our board meetings early on or later in COVID, but when we first started opening up, the board members who really wanted to engage in the meeting, we had our owl thing, right, zooming around, but they could have like, and I've seen this, I don't know if I've seen this in other meetings, but you can be in one meeting and have your laptop in front of you with a separate camera on you. You know, so like instead of having a big boardroom, like in Doug's room, he could have a board member there with his camera on them. They just have to make sure they turn off the mic and the speaker, and then they can be logged in and have a personal interaction with everyone. Like if they want to present, or they're going to present from the board table, like that's another way to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you're going to a location like that, I know we've done some off-site type of events, and it's just connecting with that venue and looking at what their equipment, you know, if they have certain plugins or you need to have extra cords or, you know, certain things to be able to plug your computer in. You know, I guess it's that forward thinking, just planning, trying to, I don't know, get all your duckies in a row beforehand. And sometimes that's hard if you don't get the right person who doesn't really understand the technology. So I know that's been really key.
And again, practice, right? All right, Peggy, do we have time for 1 or 2 more questions? Please keep-
Robin Lee had a good one and thought that instead of doing a hybrid meeting, she's wondering if anyone, and I'm guessing the panel has not, but anyone in the audience, has anyone tried to do a regular meeting without hybrid, record the meeting, and then anybody who couldn't attend just gets the recording. So instead of being a hybrid meeting, it's strictly in person, and then you give the recording to anyone who couldn't be there.
We did that, but then you end up having the speakers in it wanted us to edit it. They were like, well, I said this dumb thing, we ended up editing the thing for like, we don't have an editor on staff. So it was really a pain in the neck. Take away.
Yep.
Yeah, and if we have it where if someone registers, well, but you guys are, this is specific to a meeting. Yeah, that's a little different. I guess it would just be a disclosure to whoever's speaking, or just, hey, this is being recorded and it will be sent out to anyone who is unable to attend. And if you say something stupid, that's your fault. Don't say anything
behavior.
Yeah.
Doug, did you have something to add to that?
I was just going to say, for governance, we don't record meetings. You have to be there. I don't know. That's kind of ASAE stuff that, it's probably a good idea not to write down things that don't matter in the meeting either, but, keep track of the motions and stick with that. But for education events or something, it kind of depends on the speaker. We have the ability to record it. I know this is being recorded, so this would probably be good for somebody who couldn't attend, that type of thing. So I would say our recorded ones are more in the training venue rather than formal CE classes. You can't get CE from a recording, at least in our state. But the training is good. We like to do MLS thing. We also operate a regional MLS. So, but anyway, we like to do MLS training sessions and record them here, and then they work well for for the next 6 months or a year, until they need to be updated.
Yes. Not all meetings need to live on into eternity. Yes, those are good points. And that just gives me an opportunity to plug our YouTube channel, because this has been recorded. And so you can watch it again, share it with your other staff who missed it. I don't think anyone said anything too damaging because we don't have an editor either. So I just want to thank the panel so much. I think the diversity in terms of what you're each doing was really insightful. And I just appreciate you getting into the nitty gritty with us, including pricing and so on. So thank you so much, all 3 of you. And I'm going to turn it back over to Peggy to close out.
I just really want to thank Emily and the panelists. This has been one of the best sessions I think we've ever had. There was so much information. I encourage all of you to go back and view this video again to get anything else that you need. I will be sending a follow-up probably later today and give you the link to that, and then any of the materials that any of the panelists have as well. So thank you all for attending. Honestly, panelists, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to do this, because you were amazing. It was so much information, and everybody's really grateful for everything that you've had to share with us.
You're
Thanks,
welcome.
Everyone.